I'm Meggie Kay. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about traveling around Japan. So if you don't follow me on Instagram or Twitter, which you really should be, you know by the time of me posting this video, I will have left Japan. And like I like to do on my channel these days, when I leave a country, I usually like to kind of wrap everything together with some tips and advice that I have picked up during my time in the country. So that's what we're gonna do here about Japan. So I actually lived in Japan. If you're new here, hi, I used to live in Japan. But I'm gonna be specifically talking about travel. You're most likely going to first start off in Tokyo, maybe Osaka, but most likely Tokyo. For me, I always flew in and out of Fukuoka because I lived down on Kyushu, but most people will start their journey in Tokyo, and I have realized that most tourists in Japan will follow what I call the golden trail. And that's basically you go Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Hiroshima, and that's it. That's not a bad way to travel Japan, but So I think that, you know, this golden trail is like a good sampler of Japan if you're a first-time visitor, but it's also like the most boring parts of Japan, in my opinion. Tokyo is like not a good place to travel. I think my brother put it best. He's like, I hated visiting Tokyo for 2 weeks, but loved living there for 3 months. Like, it's one of those places that's really boring to visit, but really cool to live in. And Osaka was an alright city. Kyoto was good for like the historical temples, and it's very beautiful. It's very much a small city. And I never made it to Hiroshima because all of the things that people go to Hiroshima to see, the atomic bomb museum, the deer, the torii in the water, like those things are in other places of Japan. I've been to all of those things in other cities around Japan, so it just didn't feel like there was enough there to get me to go over there because it was kind of an out-of-a-way place from where I was living. Like, I'd have to literally spend a full day on a train to get there. Like, it was stupid. So while I don't think that Golden Trail is necessarily a bad way to see Japan, like, they're fine places, I would recommend maybe stepping off of it a little bit because Japan is a lot cooler than those 4 places. And at the end of this video, I'll give like my personal recommendations, my favorite places I've been in Japan. But yeah. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is like getting around Japan. If you're going to travel to Japan, you got to get around. And most people will talk about the trains and the rail pass. And I think that if you know where you're going in Japan and you have a pretty set idea, the rail pass is great. Sure. And if you're going to stick to like what I was talking about with the Golden Trail, those like major areas, you're probably going to be fine. Now, because I was living in Japan, I wasn't eligible to get a rail pass. But to be honest, I also didn't really care because half the time I didn't use the train. The train, I feel, is overhyped in Japan and is not actually like the be-all end-all to travel in Japan. I rarely traveled by train. And I think it's because of where I visited. Like I said, if you're going to stick to more populated areas in the bigger cities, you'll be fine. But if you want to get out into the countryside, train travel is not the way to go, like at all. Also, Okinawa, there's no trains there. Like outside of like Naha City, there's no trains. And I think people kind of just assume, because people talk about the trains so much, that there will be a train. There might not be a train to where you want to go. So I think you need to plan it out carefully, or, and this is like a big tip I give people, is to bring an international driver's license, obviously if you can drive, so you can rent a car. I owned a car, so like when I was traveling around Kyushu or when I went to Ehime, like we drove our own cars. But I rented a car in Yamanashi and I found it to be pretty affordable. It wasn't that big of a deal. I had a Japanese license by the time I rented the car, but to rent a car, you need to have an international driver's permit. So if you're not 100% sure on everywhere you want to go, or if you're looking at going into pretty rural, more countryside areas of Japan, I would recommend just bringing one in case you want to rent a car. I think driving in Japan is a great option, and yeah, that's something to look into outside of trains and rail passes. Also look into ferries. I did a whole video about taking an overnight ferry, and yeah, it's actually super convenient and really nice, again, depending on where you're going. So I think what kind of transportation you choose in Japan depends on where you want to go in Japan. So like for me, I never took the bullet train, even once, because there was no bullet train existing where I was going, you know? So these images and these things that people like to talk a lot about with Japan really only apply to that like golden trail I was talking about. So basically, if you're going to go to Japan, you're going to travel around, look at where you want to go and figure out what form of transportation is the most practical, because it might not always be this super black and white answer, and maybe you want to rent a car, or maybe, I don't know, the rail pass will be fine, or you're going to take a ferry. There are plenty of options, and you just need to kind of look and see which one is the best for you and where you want to go. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is like accommodation and booking things in Japan for your trip. I would say to book at least a month in advance, generally speaking. I noticed about a month before the dates you're looking at, things will start to sell out and book up. So if you're going to take a trip, kind of try and book it about a month before you go, and you should be safe there. It's not really the kind of country where you just like stroll in like, hey, you got a room available? Can I have it? You're probably not going to be stranded anywhere unless you go into really small, rural, countryside kind of places. I've been in situations where I'm looking online and there's like only 3 hotels in the entire town because it's just not that super populated of an area. So yeah, generally speaking, I'd say like a month. And if you're going to smaller towns, maybe a little bit more than that. The other thing to be aware of when it comes to like booking stuff and traveling is to be aware of holidays. Talking to Japanese people and Japanese people I've met, I realized very few of them go abroad, but they will travel their own country like it's no one's business. Like, they are excellent domestic travelers. So if you notice during your travels that there's gonna be a Japanese public holiday during the time you want to travel, like, make sure you book something in advance, because that's going to get booked out real quick by Japanese people wanting to travel during the holidays. And the other thing, I never ran into it personally, but I've had friends tell me that certain like museums, they will close down on the public holidays. So if there's like a particular museum or something like that, they potentially might close on public holidays. I never ran into it, so I wouldn't know, but yeah, make sure that your whole idea and your plan doesn't get spoiled by holidays and missing out because things are booked up. So I think that kind of brings me down the main tips and the main advice that I would give people if they want to travel Japan. That's it. So I figured I would end this video with some of my personal recommendations, my personal opinions and thoughts on places in Japan, kind of like my favorites, a real quick rundown. So my favorite place in Japan is probably Yamanashi Prefecture. So that's the north side of Fuji. I did a few videos about it. I went wine tasting there. I saw Mount Fuji. I went to the lakes. I had awful weather. I rented a car because the trains and buses to get around Yamanashi Prefecture were not going to be efficient. Another place I really like that I think a lot of people don't get to is Miyazaki. I love Miyazaki. I feel like I was kind of lucky to be living in Oita, which is just north of Miyazaki. It was seriously the most beautiful place in Japan I've been to. You got the ocean right there. You have the mountains. There are so many like little temples and the Takachiho Gorge. Really cheesy tourist attractions like the Nichiran coast with the Moai statues. That was actually a really fun day. And Miyazaki has like beautiful beaches without going all the way down to Okinawa. There's surfing and stuff like that there. So my last prefecture that I'm going to talk about is actually Nagasaki. I loved Nagasaki. And again, I feel like it's a little like overlooked. Not as much as Yamanashi or Miyazaki. I feel like a lot of people might not have even heard of those places. Most people have heard of Nagasaki because of historical events. But Nagasaki is actually a super beautiful city. Getting up and getting the view over Nagasaki is beautiful. I had a lot of fun at Glover Gardens and the little battleship island. I forget the official name of it. That was a really cool experience, going out there and seeing this weird little island. Super cool, super my kind of thing. Also, like Unzen, like just talking about Nagasaki Prefecture, Unzen was stunning. The natural hot springs that are up there. And if you want to do like onsen and stuff like that, Nagasaki and like Unzen specifically probably would be a great place for that. I'm selling my own prefecture short because like Oita is known as the onsen ken, but whatever. I actually never went to an onsen in Oita. But yeah, my favorite city, like I kind of said how Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto and Hiroshima are kind of like boring places to me. My favorite city, like proper city in Japan, would be Kobe. I loved Kobe. I was so jealous of like my friends that got to live in Kobe because I'm like, Kobe is a dope place. The harbor front is great, and then you can go up the mountain and it's beautiful, and there's that buzz that cities have, that like feeling of cities there, but like everyone seemed really chill and really relaxed and like not uptight the way some cities can get. It was a really fun, chill city with still being a city. The Chinatown was really cool. Yeah, like Kobe, if I go back to Japan and I have to live in a city, I would choose Kobe. Okay, so anyways, I think that is everything I have to say for this video. So if you liked it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe it because I'll be back with more videos soon. Bye.